that's been talked about in living rooms across the world.
Yeah, the Australian mushroom poisoning fatalities made headlines far beyond the sleepy Aussie town in which they happened. And the small amount of information that has been shared with the public proved enough to turn us all into those armchair detectives.
But with new information about the case emerging in recent days, should we be so quick to jump to our own conclusions? Well, here's a man with the answers. Professor David Wilson, wonderful to see you, sir. First off, why are we so obsessed with this story? It's got us.
That is the right question to ask, I think, immediately. But first, it's nice to see you again, Josie, and welcome to this morning.
Thank you, David. It's very kind. Thank you.
So, obviously, people keep saying the Australian story, but in fact, this story has universal elements to it. The first is most obviously that people love a mystery. People love talking about stories like this because they want to work out, what had happened here? Could this be what's happening there? And then secondly, if the police are really tight-lipped about what goes on, then again, there's a universality to that because the social media fills in the gaps. If the police are tight-lipped, it creates a vacuum about information. Then social media now can take a story from a small town, Leongatha, in Australia, and turn it into a worldwide phenomenon.
So it's just catch-22, though, because the police need to be tight-lipped. They can't be releasing information about the case, surely.
Well, I think the police have, both in this country and around the world, have got to react to the fact that social media is here to stay. You can't put that genie back in the bottle. And therefore, they've got to work out their news strategies in a very different way from how they've done so in the past. And of course, the final universal element to this Australian story is that, you know, this is about death cap mushrooms. This is about poisoning. And of course, as a human species, as human beings, we've evolved by being able to recognize this is healthy to eat, that food has to be avoided. And therefore, within our DNA, within our subconscious, we're very aware of poisoning stories, which again makes this a case that transcends the Australia as a continent and becomes something which is much more universal.
David, I've heard snippets here and there, and then you try and put it all together. So can you just talk us through what exactly has happened so far? So Erin Patterson, she had a meal. She invited who round to her dinner party?
Okay, so this is a family meal.
Yeah.
And Erin Patterson, as you say, is estranged from her husband. She invites over to the family meal her former parents-in-law, who are called Gail and Dawn, also at the meal.
So she's got an ex-husband, and this is her ex-husband's mum and dad.
And they're estranged. And of course, there are issues about gaining access to custody. You know, when can we see the children? When can the children come to see the estranged husband? So she invites over her former in-laws, Gail and Dawn. Gail's sister also comes to the meal, and she brings with her, Heather, she brings with her her husband, Ian. So there are 4 from the husband side of the family at the meal. And of course, Gail herself. What happens is she cooks beef Wellington, and after they had eaten the beef Wellington, over in a short space of time, 3 of those 4 people have died, and Ian, the 4th member of the 5, as it were, at the dinner party, has got life-changing illnesses and is awaiting a liver transplant. And so what we've got, therefore, Erin Patterson herself claims that she also had to be put on a saline drip, but she, of course, did not have the life-changing injuries that the other 4 had had. And suddenly this becomes a story that transcends what's going on at that party and becomes universal.
What about her children, though? Did they tuck in, or...?
No, that's, again, a good question, because what she has subsequently said is that her children had gone to the cinema, and therefore they had the meal, but as leftovers, and because their children didn't like mushrooms, they had scraped the mushrooms away from the beef Wellington, which is why they didn't have any ill effects.
Yeah, these are very muddy waters. This case is confusing, you know, it's intriguing, all the rest of it. She was silent for a while, but recently she's come forward to give another statement. Why did she make the second statement? What does she say?
So you're quite right. Initially, she's a kind of classic no comment, and she's saying she's a classic no comment now because that was the advice that she was given to her by her lawyer. She's now made a second statement, and that second statement is very much about reclaiming the narrative, putting new elements into the story that we're fascinated by, and by putting those new elements in, she hopes to reposition what people are talking about. So, Steve, she's saying, for example, she also ate the meal. She was also ill. She's saying that people, her estranged husband, she knew her estranged husband wasn't going to be at the meal. And therefore, you know, if people are speculating that she was trying to do harm to her estranged husband, well, she knew he wasn't going to be there. She's also clarified issues in relation to where her children had been and the fact that she had eaten the meal herself. But all she's doing with this new information is that she's trying to reclaim the narrative. This isn't a woman who is able to have a media strategy. This is a woman who's suddenly caught in the glare of the world's headlights, and she's thinking, my gosh, I better start talking about what's actually occurred as opposed to what people are speculating about on the internet.
Do you think her words have helped change people's perspective of her?
But she's admitted she did lie to the police about one element of this case.
And that element of the case is the
flag.
food dehydrator. And so she has admitted that she said that she had disposed of the food dehydrator months beforehand, and now she's saying she panicked and she put the food dehydrator into a refuse tip very recently.
Why would that make a difference? Did she dehydrate the mushrooms, did she?
So if you were going to... So one is in the grounds of speculation in one sense, but if the food dehydrator was used, it would be to extract the water from the death cap mushrooms, and therefore it would have made the toxins within the mushrooms that much more powerful. So the food dehydrator is now something that the police are going to pursue. They're trying to find it. They're trying to find other pieces of evidence. So yes, she has now admitted that she lied, and she is therefore trying to reposition the narrative in a way which is saying, look, why would I give all this information up if I was guilty in the way that people are speculating on in the media?
So what do you think is going to happen next? Where is this going?
Well, it's got a few twists and turns, I think, before we get to the truth. But the key message here is that the armchair detectives that you introduced, you know, we learned from the Nicola Bulley case how difficult it was for armchair detectives to start speculating online about what they think might or might not have happened. How this case will progress is that police are still investigating it. The police are still looking for evidence. The police still have to interview people in relation to the case. And quite clearly, at some stage, they will have to interview, under caution, Erin Patterson herself, at which point we're probably going to be coming back on this sofa talking about the information at that point.
And we cannot wait for that, David, OK? We cannot wait to see you again.
We'll see you soon. Thank you, David. Pleasure.
Thank you, David.